All right, we're 5 past. I'm going to go ahead and kick it off. Thanks everybody for joining today. I'll be sharing my screen as we walk through this. Yeah, welcome to the Bitcoin Inheritance webinar. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Hector Rosekrans. I'm the Director of Client Services here at Casa. And yeah, I'm excited to talk to you guys about what's going on with inheritance right now, how we think about it, the importance of kind of doing this and making sure that you have a plan in place. And then there'll be plenty of time for some Q&A there at the end. So first of all, let's see here. Yeah, disclaimer. So there should be like a bunch of legalese here, but basically I am not a lawyer. I'm going to get into kind of some of our distinctions here and some of the challenges that the difference between the technology and the law can present. But the bottom line is I'm not a lawyer. Nothing that I present here should be construed as legal advice. I'm going to talk about the technology. I'm going to talk about some of the law and some of the ways in which they interact with each other. But again, not legal advice. It's really important that you do work with a competent attorney when it comes to answering these hard questions around who is supposed to get control of your Bitcoin, who's supposed to get control of those assets, how to potentially minimize tax liabilities, all that good stuff. All right, this is a little bit about me. For those of you who don't know me, I've been with Casa for about 2 years. My background before that, spent some time in startups, spent some time doing blockchain things at JP Morgan. I like to tell people I've gone from blockchainer to shitcoiner to Bitcoiner. Very happy with where I've landed. I also have a background in security. I spent the first few years of my career in the U.S. Navy as a surface warfare officer. Okay, so when we go through this today, we're basically going to talk about why this stuff matters at a high level. Some of the challenges, as I was mentioning, the legal side versus the code side, what I like to call the hybrid custody model, and why I think that this is really the right approach. Casa's approach is the right one to be thinking about when it comes to Bitcoin, self-custody, and inheritance, because there's a lot of trade-offs, and I kind of want to go through our model there. I'm going to go through our approach and how we kind of think about things, talk about the limitations, and then get into some of the specifics, but generally keep it at a fairly high level here. So first of all, like, why does this stuff matter? I'm gonna break it down. Like, there's the legal side of it and there's the technical side of it. And we're gonna be kind of coming back to some of these themes throughout the discussion. First of all, on the legal front, it's important that we establish who has ownership of the assets, who has ownership of the Bitcoin. And that's actually a separate consideration potentially from who has ownership and who has control of the Bitcoin, who's taking control of the Casa account. One thing that we kind of initially did was we said, okay, this is going to be our single beneficiary approach. But that terminology is really confusing because it's not actually your end beneficiaries who we're going to work with at Casa. It might be, it might not be. It might be somebody who can assist your beneficiaries and kind of take control of Bitcoin and ensure that Bitcoin gets distributed out to your end beneficiaries. But like, there's kind of that intermediary step, and we're not sure if that's necessarily your only beneficiary or it's just someone who's going to kind of serve that coordinating role. So it's really important to get that right on the technical side. It's also really important to spell that out legally so that you know and everyone knows what your wishes are ahead of time. Legal plans can change, stuff comes up, obviously, but you want to kind of start thinking about this as early as possible, so you don't leave your heirs in a situation where they're going to be confused. There's also questions of liabilities. What does your estate owe? What is what are any outside liabilities? What are claims on your estate? There's questions of distribution, how that actually works, and of course, everybody's favorite subject, taxes. This is one area where like the timing actually does matter a fair amount. There's a lot of changes kind of being proposed in the tax code. I can't tell you when I think those are going to take effect. I can't tell you exactly what those are and how they would play into your particular situation. Talk to a lawyer about that kind of stuff. For example, the one thing that does come up is there may be a lowering of the lifetime gift tax exemption. So if that's lowered from like $10 million to $3 million, and you donate, your money, basically you donate to a irrevocable trust that goes to your kids. that money is, you can donate up to $10 million before, before that change goes into effect. And now if that Bitcoin grows from, say 1 million to 20 million, because we do a 20X in the next decade or so, you have already given away those assets. You've only used up that $1 million of your total exemption. Of course, if they lower the exemptions, or if Bitcoin goes to, does a 20X before you give that money away, it's important to understand that like you're now, that same amount of Bitcoin will use up a lot more of your lifetime gift exemption. Anyways, that's as deep as I'm going to get into the legal stuff. Talk to a lawyer. It's really important to get right. On the technical side, obviously, this is really important too. The first thing here is sustainable security. It's really important that we have a good inheritance plan in place, but it's also important that inheritance plan doesn't compromise your day-to-day management of your key set. It doesn't compromise the overall assumptions around the security model that we put in place. And that it's comfortable, it's livable, it's something that you can use, it's something that you can implement, it's something that you can update when need be. And it's not something that requires a ton of careful planning or a treasure hunt for your beneficiaries decades down the line when they were totally clear on it when you set it up, but then later on it's they forgot to ask the right questions and you updated the passphrase or something like that, and now they're in a tough spot. And also, like, the distribution stuff comes into play on the technical side as well. We need to be really careful about who is actually going to be in control of the process of distributing the Bitcoin, because that point of control, as that point of control passes from a primary client onto a beneficiary, sorry, I'm not using that word anymore, onto we'll call them the recovery agent, the person who's going to take custody and then do the distributions. You want to make sure you feel very good about who that person is. And then finally, there's some upside here. There is some benefit. So obviously, everyone should pay their taxes. Everyone should pay all their liabilities, do the right thing, follow the law, etc. But that said, there's a difference between if you have self-custody, if you're going through a setup where your beneficiaries are taking direct custody of the funds, and there's a conflict around what the liabilities should be on the estate. There's a conflict around what the taxes owed by the estate actually are. Possession is 9/10 of the law, and we want to make sure that your beneficiaries are well equipped to have the resources to challenge any potential legal issues that arise in this kind of situation. They have custody of the assets directly. They're not relying on whatever the exchange decides to do to minimize their legal risk or minimize blowback in other potential areas on other potential business they have before various regulators and courts. If your beneficiaries have custody, they can make the decisions. They can hire the lawyers to challenge whatever the process is going to be. The ball's in their court in a very different way, obviously, than if they are not holding the keys, if they are not holding the assets themselves. So again, this is just on the legal stuff. The code is light years ahead of the law. We get legal questions all the time on all kinds of different aspects of, hey, like, is it okay if I have a key set and that key set applies to my trust as well? Is it okay if like the same account is being used on my, if I'm using the same keys for like my Casa account and then an IRA account through choice? The bottom line is that like what we're going to tell you the law says is the most conservative interpretation of it, because frankly, the law doesn't exist yet. The law doesn't understand how custody, possession, and control work with a private key that should be in one location, but maybe there's a copy of it in a second location in a totally separate jurisdiction. Maybe it's part of a 3 of 5, and another one of the keys in the key set is held, like through our mobile key system via cloud storage. The law doesn't understand this stuff. The law is not prepared for this. And so we're going to tell you what makes the most sense from a custody perspective. We're going to tell you what makes the most sense from a technical perspective. That said, and we're going to take the most conservative interpretation whenever we are saying anything about what the law says. That said, talk to your lawyer, figure out what they're comfortable with, what you are comfortable with, and we can answer some questions that way. Like I said, there's many legal questions that cannot be answered right now. It's just the state of things. Hopefully there will be some test cases that get resolved in a favorable fashion that makes sense for the industry, that makes sense for the asset class. But it is what it is right now. All right, let's talk about the three high-level kind of different ways in which you can think about custody and why we think that the hybrid approach makes a lot of sense here. Number one, go with custodian, go with an exchange. We all know what this looks like. You have an account somewhere. That company is responsible for managing your, Bitcoin. You have an IOU on their system. And generally speaking, most of the time, they're going to let you withdraw it. But obviously, it's those exceptions that we worry about. It's those times when either something weird comes up, or maybe there's a potential run on the bank. We want to make sure that Bitcoin is in our custody. The particular risks, well, obviously at this point, it does seem like the large, well-capitalized exchanges are very good on the security front and are very good at managing their private keys. The individual accounts, the logins are not secure. And basically, you find a vulnerability within a custodian, through a process. I can hack I can figure out, here's a list of Coinbase clients, here's a list of emails. I can figure out how to exploit it so I can get the passwords on 5% of those. From that 5%, I can get a 2FA on another 1% of that. That's an exploit that you can apply to a ton of people and a ton of assets. We have seen this recently. So even though the exchange itself is fairly secure and we can assume they're pretty good at managing private keys, we can't assume that the login system, that the account system that does actually authorize you to send funds off the exchange is secure. I'm sitting in a webinar. All right, I got a little bit of feedback here. If you're on Casa on the line, please just make sure you're on mute. So the second thing here we can talk through is wallets. Obviously, self-custody wallets are a much better option, but just one second. There we go. Okay, self-custody wallets are obviously a very different approach, but when it comes to, there is going to be this risk, obviously, that your loved ones aren't going to know how to do it. They're going to have trouble. They're going to run into issues. They're not going to understand some of the various technical complexities that come in with seed phrases, getting onboarding, getting them on board and making sure that they understand this, and not only understand it when you go through and you do this kind of long, painful process of setting up inheritance, but that information stays fresh and stays relevant, and that they're able to tap into that knowledge, potentially years, decades down the road. That's a very risky assumption to take. And this is where the hybrid approach comes in. This is where we want at Casa, we want to make sure that you control the keys. We want to make sure that you are in the driver's seat. We also want to make sure that we're there as your agent, as your backup, and that we can provide that service and support that you might expect from a custodian, and that level of infrastructure, while at the same time making sure the keys stay in your hands, that direct control is in your hands, and we never actually take custody of the funds. So we're here to hold your hands, not your keys. That's always been the idea of Casa. If you haven't heard it, my other favorite analogy is, if you're going with a custodian, you're hopping on a train, you hope that train lets you on, you hope they let you off, you hope that the stop happens to be where you are. If you're going with a do-it-yourself wallet, you're basically building, you're building a scooter yourself. If you have the knowledge and the technical know-how to do that and to do it well and to do it safely, that's fantastic. But we just want to be a car company. We want to build a great product and sell it to you and train you how to use it and provide the service and support that you need when issues come up. We're OnStar system. All right. So let's dive a little bit more into the inheritance risks here. And I know all you guys are Casa clients, you get it, but there's a couple things here I did want to emphasize that especially makes sense when it comes to this particular problem. Bottom line is that if you are Coinbase, you make your money every time somebody trades crypto. Every time they trade from Bitcoin to ETH, from ETH to dollars to Doge, that is their business. They make money trading assets. That means that support is obviously not their strong suit. It's something that they have to do to provide a halfway decent product. Obviously, I mean, if you guys caught on CNBC, there was a whole segment on how terrible Coinbase support is, which I love that it's gone that mainstream at this point. And they'll certainly help you. They'll certainly help beneficiaries take over accounts and get the assets back get the assets back and get the economic benefit back when somebody passes away. But it's not their business. It's not what they want to be doing. It's the back office of the back office, and not an interesting money making challenge for them. You can run into delays. You can get outright refusals that you're going to have to challenge legally. There's just that legal uncertainty of like, hey, if you're not in, if you're not in the same jurisdiction, how's it going to work? What are the issues that are going to come up? How they sort through all that? Again, we can talk about the hacking and social engineering, and then there's just the potential for straight up human error. Coinbase has not been doing this for that long. What's the likelihood that an agent on the other end of one of these processes has makes a mistake and gives out the Bitcoin to the wrong person? Maybe it's an error that's been disinherited or something like that. The process breaks down, and we're out of luck when we talk about bearer assets. At the same time, on the do-it-yourself side, there's a lot of issues as well. So biggest thing, and if you guys are at all like my family, your beneficiaries might be less technically savvy than you. Maybe they are 2 years old. Maybe they don't have any interest in ever touching a hardware wallet unless they absolutely have to. Many people in our lives are less technically savvy, or understand a lot less about private key management than crypto natives, Bitcoin people do. And what that means is that a few things. First of all, they're going to be vulnerable to making mistakes, making very costly mistakes. And the other thing that's oftentimes overlooked is like, okay, maybe they'll just ask for help. But if they don't know who to ask for help, if you haven't solved that problem, if there's no one in their life that has the level of knowledge that is going to be able to, that's going to be able to help them out, they might end up asking the wrong person. They might end up asking somebody who is a malicious actor. They might end up asking someone who's going to try to figure out how to squeeze into this process and steal their Bitcoin. And there's really no way to help that person, to help your beneficiaries sort through this, unless you've made a plan ahead of time, so they know who to go to. They know who's trustworthy. And then the one other thing here is what I like to call the wedding planning issue. For the vast majority of us, we will plan one wedding in our lives. Maybe we got kids, etc., what have you. But most people get married once, maybe twice. So when you go into that wedding planning market, you are somebody you get to do this once. You get to do it maybe a couple of times with kids and whatnot. But there's such little information. There's so much information asymmetry between planning a wedding from someone who does it once, from planning a wedding, if you're a wedding planner and you do this all day, every day, it's your bread and butter. And in the inheritance scenario, what this means is there's a lot of risk of these edge case failures. If you do it yourself on the inheritance front, you create some kind of treasure map, you create some kind of system with dead man switches and multi-sig and schmears and all these different pieces. It might be perfect. It might be better than what Casa can provide for all of our clients. But if it has a 10% failure rate, your family is only going to get to roll that die once. Yeah, sure. 9 of you guys are going to be fine. But that 10th person who implements that solution, like that's it. That's the one. It's one shot you got. Compared with Casa, we developed this approach. We developed these inheritance protocols for our entire client base. We are going to stress test. We are going to edge case test. We are going to see everything under the sun when it comes to issues setting this stuff up. Fortunately, we have not had to implement too many of these yet. We actually haven't had to implement any of these yet, but we're going to learn a ton of information every single time that we go through this process that is then going to feed back into the product that we are developing and bring to market for our clients. And that's what it comes down to. Our goal is that when the time comes, control of your Bitcoin passes safely into the hands of your loved ones. That's our North Star. That is what we are working towards. That is what we are building our business around. We want to get this right. We want to provide a product and a service here. Contrast that with Coinbase, what they want to do is have you sell you shitcoins and have you trading in and out. Contrast that with a wallet manufacturer or even an open source wallet. They want to provide a baseline core service that people will incorporate into their lives, but they want that product to be as kind of broadly applicable as possible. At Casa, our model assumes that there's going to need to be support. There's going to need to be service. There's going to be someone, need to be a technical expert there to hold your hands. That's why we build this business. And that's at the core of our design decisions around inheritance. All right. All that said, let's get into the nitty-gritty of how our process works right now. We want inheritance to be simple, flexible, robust, and secure. And these apply if you're doing it yourself, if you want to build something because diamond's too expensive or what have you, you want to build, some type of inheritance approach into your cost system or something slightly different. The same principles are going to apply. So simple, and this is one of James's biggest things, simplicity is security. The simpler something is, the more secure it is, because it is easy to implement. It means you're not going to make mistakes. It is easy to maintain. That means you're more likely to do the maintenance. It is easy to update. That means that you're more likely to update it when you have life changes, when things happen. And it's easy to execute, so that we're limiting the number of things that can possibly go wrong by focusing on making sure a few simple things go absolutely right. Complex systems, complex setups often lead to insecure workarounds and unexpected failure modes. This is what I was talking about with that. If there's a 10% failure mode with a do-it-yourself approach, your family has a 10% chance of losing their Bitcoin, and they'll probably never know that 10% chance exists until they're rolling the dice when the time comes. Flexible. We want to ensure that this process is adaptable to many different situations and levels of trust, depending on your family situation, depending on who the people in your lives are, depending on beneficiaries, legal status, trust, all these different things. Simple makes it flexible. Simple makes it applicable to a lot of different people. We also want to make sure it is robust. And this is where, again, what we bring to the table as Casa, we bring the institutional knowledge, we bring the technical expertise, and we can leverage our technical systems to basically provide a really robust and highly recoverable solution. Simple also means robust. Means that we kind of build it once, we design it once, we test it once, we use the things we already have in place. And again, the Casa recovery key, we test it all the time. We use it all the time. The mobile key system, people use the mobile key system to recover mobile keys, transfer mobile keys. Those are two of the core things that we're going to bring to bear here. And this is where we like to really make it robust. And of course, security. Security at the end of the day is everything that we do. Simple is secure, secure is simple. And one of the assumptions we want to make here, again, it goes back to that flexibility piece. We want to ensure that your inheritance setup does not in any way compromise the overall integrity of the Casa account. We're going to minimum viable access, minimum viable inheritance by applying some of the stuff that we apply on the technical level. It makes it so you don't have to, make sure that your one beneficiary has secretly all three of the seed phrases hanging out, or they have access they have direct access to all three of the hardware wallets, because that is introducing a potential vulnerability, a potential risk vector into the setup, which is obviously, while it makes life easier to recover when the time comes, it also puts you at risk in the meantime. Okay, we're talking about a few things that are out of scope for now. These are things we want to work on, that we want to have approaches to, but we don't have right now, and I'm not sure when we're going to be able to implement them. But the first one is anonymity, and this isn't a government requirement. No one's telling us to collect this information, but we do require KYC for both the client and the beneficiary. This is for your protection, the protection of your assets, and for our liability purposes. We need to be able to verify when the time comes that. So first of all, we need to be able to verify what you want to have happen, and we need to know who you are to be able to verify that, so that when the time comes, we can basically back check everything and make sure that the right person told us all this information. So you'll sign a legal agreement that says, here's who I am, here's my beneficiary information, so we know who you are at the outset. And that's really important, because the next check for us, the first check that kicked this off, is has this happened? Do we need to implement inheritance? Has the client passed away? Do that, we verify death certificate, be able to verify that death certificate, we need to know who you are ahead of time. Again, not a legal requirement. This is so that we don't make a mistake and execute a process that, that you don't want to have happen. This is something that we're working on. Oh, sorry. The last thing is we also need to be able to verify, who's contacting us and make sure that is the person that you identified while you're alive, while you're a Casa client, and we know who they are. This is something that we're working on. I have no expectation for when we might have a synonymous inheritance recovery option. It's something I'm very excited to think about, but it's definitely in the early stages of planning. I wouldn't expect it within the next, I don't know, year at absolute minimum. So something we're thinking about, but definitely doesn't exist yet. The other thing here is sovereign inheritance. The question is like, okay, well, what happens if I pass away and Casa's gone at that point? And the answer to that is, well, that ideally won't happen, because unless those two things happen at almost the exact same time, we should have the time to either execute the inheritance process, or you should have the time to change your approach to inheritance. Inheritance is a living process. Like, the plan today isn't necessarily what's going to make sense as the plan 10 years from now. So it's important that you update how you're doing this. It's important that you continually kind of think about this. We implement this as part of our check-in process. We're going to make sure, hey, does it still make sense? Is it still the correct beneficiary? Do they still have the documents? Have you done your health checks? Are the keys still working? It's just part of like the standard maintenance. But should something happen to Casa? Should we go out of business? I'm not going to tell you to say, okay, yeah, let's put those 3 seed phrases and the sovereign recovery instructions in an envelope somewhere. That's a huge risk. If something happens to us, what you need to do is you need to make sure that you update the inheritance process in the way you're looking at it, because we're not going to be around to help you at that point, obviously. Again, this kind of goes into that category of diversification of risk across time. We're all going to die someday. Casa is probably going to exist for 500 years or so, but we'll probably go out of business at some point. Maybe that's a little aggressive. Maybe around, we may have run our course around the time the block subsidy runs out, 2140. Long time here, but these things are going to happen. The risk of them both happening within that same short window of time before we have had the ability to adjust to the new situation in the world, that is very low. It's very low that like those two things are going to happen at the exact same time. Certainly something to think about, and maybe have a contingency plan just in case. But again, that's not really also something that we can totally prepare you for, because we're not going to have anything to, we're not going to have the resources to help you out in that scenario, or we're also not going to tell you to do something that would be insecure in the meantime. Okay, so phases of inheritance are pretty straightforward. Setup, choose your recovery agents, and we onboard them. It's fairly straightforward. Maintenance, periodically complete health checks, ensure that your plan matches any changes to your life. Again, this is your health checks. This is the making sure that the recovery agents are still the right people. And then recovery. Your recovery agent will contact Casa. They assume control of the account, and they're going to complete a recovery transaction. Pretty straightforward. All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty a little bit here of what recovery actually looks like, because we start from recovery, and I don't have slides for this. Something happened to my slides here, but we're going to talk through what recovery looks like, because that's going to inform what setup should look like. Because setup is going to follow, because setup is going to set us up for a successful recovery. So when the time comes, my biggest concern is that there is no question in the mind of a recovery agent about what to do. Our typical assumption is that the primary recovery agent is going to be a spouse, and they're going to have no knowledge of Bitcoin. That's like the baseline kind of design assumption that we're starting from. So what we do is we say, give that person a single action that they can perform to get the ball rolling and to get the help that they need. That single action comes in the form of a folder. That folder is going to contain a few items, which I'll get into. But the most important thing in there is a little sealed envelope that we ship out to the recovery agent. That sealed envelope just says a little note card that says, "Hey, sorry for your loss. This stuff is complicated. Give us a call. Contact information for my team here at Casa, VIP help, email, phone number. We got all that stuff, so they can get a hold of us right away and get the process started." Once they contact Casa, we'll start getting these balls in motion. We're going to need to verify a couple things. We need to verify their identity. We're going to need to verify the fact that you've actually passed away. So we need to verify a death certificate. Those are the two things that we need to verify. Once we've done that, once we verify that the person requesting the takeover of the account is really the right person, once we verify that it is the right time, then we'll transfer control of the Casa account to an email specified by the recovery agent. They'll say, yep, here's my Gmail. I want you to change the email on the Casa account to this Gmail. As soon as they've done that, we reset the password. They are now the client. They have now assumed control. They've assumed control of that Casa account. As soon as they do that, they can download the app, they can sign in, they can see the balances, they have the full control that any client would have, and they have the full access to our planning service and support team. One thing they won't have yet is they won't have that mobile key. So they'll see those four. They'll see those four purple circles. Hopefully, because we've been doing our health checks, everything's good to go there. They're not going to have that mobile key because that mobile key lives on your phone. That mobile key is backed up to your cloud storage. And I don't want to assume that a client's going to give away the password to their iCloud. I don't want to assume that a client's going to, that a client has that a recovery agent is going to be able to recover that client's phone. I want to assume none of that. So instead, what we do is we say, okay, next up, we're going to get a copy of that encrypted mobile key. And that is item number 2 that's going to go in that inheritance envelope. And if you guys haven't seen this yet, the encrypted mobile key is just a PDF you print out. It's got a QR code on it. That QR code is the key. It's the key in encrypted form. So the way it works is as soon as the recovery agent has now taken control of the Casa account, they just go ahead, tap the mobile key, scan that QR code. That QR code loads the encrypted data onto their secure element. Then our app is going to make a call out to Casa servers, send over the decryption key. Now they have a brand new the same old fully functional mobile key right there on their secure element without having to access your Google Drive, without having to access your iCloud Drive. And so that's item number 2 is that QR code printout that's going to go in the envelope. So they've got access to Casa, and of course they have access to the Casa key as well. And now they have access to the mobile key. Item number 3 is pretty straightforward as well. I'm sure you know what it is. It is a hardware key, and actually ideally a seed phrase backup as well. So item number 3, one more envelope. In that envelope is a seed phrase. If the person has direct access to a hardware device, that's great. On the seed phrase card, we also are going to have you write down the PIN in case they have access to the hardware device. We're going to have you write down passphrase. Please don't use the passphrase. I have that there just in case, but don't use it. Don't do it. It's going to, the likelihood of causing issues with passphrases, we generally think that in a multi-sig setup, they cause much more confusion, complexity, and risk. But I do have that space for a passphrase there. If you choose to do so, please don't. My strong recommendation. So they're going to have that access to that seed phrase at a minimum. And then they're going to talk to us if they have the hardware device accessible to them. If it's, let's say, your spouse and they know the combination of the safe and they have the PIN code for the Trezor, great, easy day. They can go right in. We're going to have them do a health check, make sure that we have all the keys good to go right off the bat. If they don't have a hardware device physically, we're going to ship them one and we'll walk them through setting up a new hardware device with that seed phrase that they've received. And that's pretty much all there is to it. We now have 3 keys. We have the mobile key, we have the Casa recovery key, and we have a hardware key. All three types of keys, and we're ready to go. We're ready to send a transaction. At this point, again, we're advisors. We are the clients. We're the new clients guide here. At the diamond level, what we do is we automatically extend the service out a year. If they want to keep using Casa, fantastic. We're going to ship them a whole new onboarding package. We're going to treat them like a brand new client. We're going to get things started, and they're not going to have to think about paying us for a year at that point. At the same time, we're also going to provide them guidance if they want to transfer the funds to an exchange, if they want to transfer it to a different custodian, if they just want some guidance on how to use hardware because they think we're too expensive or they don't want to use this for some other reason. We're happy to provide the training and guidance and get them to whatever long-term custodial solution they want. We'd love it to be Casa, but we're never going to insist on that, and we're always going to provide support for going with other options. So that pretty much covers the inheritance process, what it looks like when we execute it. So setup is pretty straightforward from there. Basically, all that setup entails is we need to know that you want to do this. We need to know who you've identified as the person who's going to take control of of your Bitcoin account. We know where that person is, so we can send them the envelope. The envelope is going to contain the envelope is going to contain one sealed envelope with instructions to contact us, two open envelopes that you're going to put the mobile key in, the mobile key encrypted backup, and you're going to put the seed phrase in. You do that. You have the envelope. You seal up the little envelopes inside the big envelope, and that's pretty much it. Setup is very straightforward. Is very easy, very clean, very streamlined. There are a couple other questions that typically come up here. Is like, well, can I have these assets in a trust? Again, first of all, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know. Second of all, what I care about is, sure, if they're in a trust, that's great. We certainly have clients who, have the assets in a trust and use Casa in that way. I don't have a legal view on that. What I will tell you is that we need to make sure that the trustee matches the recovery agent, matches the person that is supposed to actually take custody of the funds. Someone can be a trustee on your trust and have the legal rights to the Bitcoin. If they don't have the keys, they don't have the Bitcoin. And so this is kind of a question that comes up frequently. It's like, well, couldn't I implement this process in this way, X, Y, Z, and then, it'll work from a legal perspective? The answer is absolutely. But I can't guarantee that's going to work from a cryptographic perspective, from a key management perspective, unless we've gone through the onboarding and we've set it up in the way that we've designed. Again, this is not the only way to do inheritance. This is the way that we think is the most simple, that we think is the most robust, that we think is the most secure, we think is the most flexible. The advantages of taking that route is that you get the entire knowledge, the entire institutional memory of Casa and of Casa clients that go through this setup and experience our approach to inheritance this way. And that's pretty much it. So let's see if I have any other slides here. Yeah, one more slide. Last thing, and the most important thing: choose the right person. This person, whoever is the recovery agent, they have control of your Bitcoin. They will be taking full control of your Bitcoin. They don't have to be the end beneficiary. It's great if they are. If they are, you don't have to worry about this. But if that person is not your end beneficiary for whatever reason, it's really important that you trust them to do the right thing and to carry out your wishes according to your estate plan. They actually are going to sign those transactions, transfer the Bitcoin to your end beneficiaries once we get to that stage. That's the thing that matters. That is the single most important aspect of choosing someone to be the recovery agent, is your trust. We would love it if they have legal and fiduciary responsibilities to take care of your beneficiaries. We'd love it if they are a beneficiary themselves, or it's like, they're brothers and sisters, and there's no question that they're going to do the right thing. We'd love it if they're familiar with Bitcoin private key management. We'd love it if they're technically competent. None of those things are requirements. The only thing that's a requirement is that you trust them. We will handle any level of technical competence. We handle every level of technical competence on the client services team. Oftentimes, like, a good compromise here is say, like, okay, we're going to set up, I'm going to have, like, my wife is going to be is going to be the primary recovery agent. I'm trying not to say beneficiary because it gets confusing. My wife is the primary recovery agent, but I'm going to have, my nephew who's like deep in Bitcoin or deep in crypto trading or whatever, and just has experience with treasuries and ledgers. I'm going to make sure that she knows to contact him for any additional support that she needs. And we're happy to work with multiple people in that kind of situation. The trust is the important thing. We can solve for the technical competence question. The other thing here that's important to talk about is alternates. So, for instance, something, God forbid, let's say something happens to a client and their spouse at the same time. The spouse is the primary recovery agent. We do generally like to have a fallback a fallback person as a secondary recovery agent. And basically the way it works is we would execute the exact same process that we do with the primary recovery agent. We just need a death certificate for the primary recovery agent as well. And then we transition that over to now the alternate recovery agent becomes a primary. Exact same process plays out. So it's sequential. It's not like they're an alternate, it's not like they are part of it's not like they're a separate part of the recovery process. And that's it. That's overall our approach to inheritance, how we think about it at a high level when it comes to all the different kind of approaches to this, why we think that Casa has the best approach, and why I think everyone's going to be doing this, and we're going to be consulting with financial planners and institutional, like your Fidelities, your Chase private client wealth management groups on this approach, and how having a human in the loop that has a relationship with the client is a critical step to making this whole thing happen. So that's all I have, but I'd love to take whatever questions you guys have at this point. And I don't know if anyone from the team can see our Q&A here, but let me see if I can stop sharing my screen. Stop sharing. There we go. All right, I'll pull up some questions here. What do we got? Yes, recording. And let me find this. Oh, there's my Q&A. Okay, yes, answering the first question here is, right now, this is only available at Diamond. We are thinking about offering this at Platinum. It would have to be a much more kind of scaled down version of it. I'm not sure when we're gonna implement that. We got a lot of stuff planned for Q4. We got a lot of stuff planned for the next year. It's definitely something that we're thinking about, but it would be a much more kind of lightweight approach for an add-on. Right now, the plan is to have this available at Diamond, and that's and that's for the foreseeable future. Just because it still takes a fair amount of kind of onboarding and handholding to get us to the point where this is ready to go. And then on the back end, obviously, there's going to be a lot of work to make sure we get this absolutely right when the first few times that we're implementing it. So I expect that, hopefully it's a long time, and I expect us to have Platinum rolled out well before we have to implement this for the first time. But that's one of the that's one of the things that one of the reasons why we haven't done it yet is that there's still, we're still kind of in the process of, this is a lot of work on the client services team to implement and definitely to recover as well. All right, and I talked about the multiple recovery agents. Yes, it's a tiered list. I only have the capability right now, like all our documents are just set up for a primary and alternate. If you have more, we can definitely accommodate that. And yeah, so we are actually going to be providing an envelope. And my idea here is that we want that to be it should be a single action that the recovery agent has to take. They go find the envelope, they open it up. From there, they get in touch with Casa. All the materials that they need are right in that envelope. And so is the instructions on how to reach us so we can get the ball rolling. And that envelope is in possession of the recovery agent, the person who's going to be taking over control of the account. There's no need to move from your current key set to a new key set to implement this process. In some earlier iterations of our approach to inheritance, we did move from a 3 of 5 to a 3 of 6 model. That was based on an assumption that we're going to have a ton of lawyers and a ton of RIAs and other kind of third parties involved in a custody set. Bottom line is that estate attorneys don't want to do this. They don't want the liability. There's a few that are willing to take it on, but the few clients who have that lawyer is doing a lot of other very high dollar business for that client, and it's kind of doing it as like a, I'm your person, I'm going to take care of you and your family and the estate and the whole thing. Some of them are lawyers who are, their whole job is just serve that one client. Most retail focused estate planners, personal attorneys are not willing to take on that level of risk and responsibility of holding a key. And so that approach where we're going to say like, hey, a lawyer is going to have, one key that they manage, and they're going to manage it on, a couple dozen Casa 386 accounts, same key with different passphrases in this case. That really didn't materialize from like the market just isn't interested in that. So this is why we transitioned to the 305 model. But if you've heard about 306, that's kind of the reason for it. There still are cases where we will transition to a 306. It's kind of a one-off conversation based on the specific needs of that Diamond client, which is a lot of the consulting that we get into during like a Diamond client setup and understanding what their individual needs are. Yeah, so great question about the mobile key. Yes, the mobile key is out of our reach. And so this is why it's really important that what you do is you print out a copy of the encrypted mobile key. So the way we break up the mobile key is this. Casa, we store an encrypted copy of the mobile key, and we store that in cloud storage. And that's the same piece of data that you print out on the PDF on the mobile key encrypted backup. It's also, if you ever get a new phone and you've gone through this process, you don't even have to sync it up to Google Drive or to iCloud. You can just scan the QR code from the old phone on the new phone. If you're logged into the Casa app on both, it'll transfer that key over right away. So that's how the key is stored. Now, Casa never takes custody of that. We don't want to. We cannot, because if we could, that would not only be very bad from a client perspective, it would be very bad from a regulatory standpoint for us, particularly at the 203 level, because now we are a virtual asset service provider. We'd have control of the client funds, which means we are now a fully regulated institution. We're no longer a tech company that gets to just provide software and services. We now have to comply with all kinds of financial laws and regulatory requirements, which we want to stay way away from. So the way it works when it comes to recovering that key is, once control of the account is transferred over to your beneficiary, they're able to log in, they're able to scan the encrypted mobile key, and we send them the decryption key for it. So it's encrypted, so Apple and Google can't steal it, or someone who scans that QR code just with like any old QR code scanner can't steal it. It's encrypted for that reason. So that data is, it's just gibberish until you pair it with the decryption key. Casa holds that key. You put the two of them together, two halves of the puzzle, make a valid key that's active on the that's active on the secure element on that phone. So they need to have that QR code in order to complete the recovery, and that's why it's one of the items that goes into the that goes into the envelope. We do not hold the key; we just hold the ability to, we hold the key to the key. We hold half the key is the best way to think about it. All right, what other questions that you guys have? I'm trying to think of other things that kind of come up during onboardings. I talked a bit about kind of the trust setups. Yes, we absolutely can accommodate trust. Typically, instead of identifying the individual, we're still going to identify the individual, but we also want to identify the trust as well. And there can, because you can change trustees on trust, we're going to follow the law, but it's important that you communicate with us. It's important that we're working with you so that we can make sure that any new trustee and a replacement trustee has access to that envelope, has access to the tools that when the time comes, again, the law might say you take control of the Bitcoin. If you don't have the ability to access the keys, there's nothing that we can do. So at a platinum level, what we do specify is we specify an emergency contact. And that's different from a recovery agent. So there's a question here about like, what's the difference between a recovery agent and an emergency contact? Your emergency contact is just who we reach out to in the event that, that that there's a problem on your account. Typically speaking, this is, you've hit emergency lockdown, you've requested a Casa recovery signature, and on a video verification call, we have reason to believe that you are under duress. So, we've finished that call, and then we, if for some reason we suspect that there's a problem, we suspect that you're under duress, we suspect that you've been hacked and we can't get a hold of you. At that point, we're going to reach out to that emergency contact. But that's entirely separate and an entirely different purpose than, than like a designated recovery agent. Yeah, so someone's asking right now, like, is it possible to like do inheritance at the platinum level? The bottom line is yes, it is possible to implement this at the platinum level and do it yourself. But there's a number of compromises that you're going to need to make to your security in order to do that. You would need to, first of all, because the Casa at the platinum tier is designed for a single individual, you basically need to ensure that that the person you want to take control of the account is able to, first of all, sign in to your account and you're giving them full access to your login credentials. And I know that's not a big deal for most people, but from our perspective, it is introducing an unnecessary security vulnerability into the process, and just not something that we're going to do at baseline. And that'll get them access to, that'll get them access to, at minimum, the login to the account. If you also give them access to your iCloud account and your Google Drive account, yeah, they could probably download the mobile key as well. But now they're going to have to basically spoof their identity to Apple and to Google. Sorry, spoof your identity to Apple and to Google. They could probably do it, but if you run into any problems, if there's any issues in that process, it's going to come out that like you're kind of trying to work around this, and you're going to have to go through whatever Google and Apple's like account transition process is. And I don't know how robust that is. I don't know what their policies are around around turning over data on a deceased client's account and turning over control of that data to someone else. I think that they're fairly hesitant to do that in general, just because there's all kinds of potential downstream risks and liabilities that that we don't want to take on, that they don't want that they don't want to take on. But yeah, the bottom line is you could do this at platinum. You could go and you could say, here's what's happened. I am the legal rightful beneficiary of this Casa account, as has been stated in a trust document or an estate plan. And you go to a court and get a court order that's going to tell Casa, hey, Casa, turn over control of this to this person. It's going to say, hey, Google, turn over control of this data to this person. It's going to say, hey, Apple, turn over control of this, turn over control of this information to this person. And yeah, of course, we're going to follow the law and we're going to do that. But again, you're now relying on the court system to be able to adjudicate that claim effectively, and then issue those orders against Casa and potentially against those other custodians for the mobile key. You're also going to need, like, that client's also going to need to make sure, sorry, that person's also going to need to make sure they have the technical wherewithal to go through this process. If a court says that they are now the client, we're going to treat them like the client, but we're also human. And if you're trying to like work around systems that we put in place to make sure this is a smooth or orderly recovery, it's not going to be like we're not going to treat that person the same way we would treat somebody who's like proactively said, yes, we want the service. We're going to go through the process to set it up. I hope that answers the question. I do understand that this is expensive. There certainly are ways to do it. At the end of the day, we are a software and service provider. We are going to, the keys are yours to do with what you want. We're going to provide guidance and recommendations on the best way to do it. So, good question about the mobile key. So we assume that the mobile key, that the device itself will be lost when someone passes away. That's why we print out the mobile key encrypted backup, a piece of paper with a QR code that the recovery agent is able to access. That piece of paper is going to go in the envelope with the seed phrase and with the instructions to contact Casa. So we have a backup copy of it. It's also a great idea to save that to a password manager. We assume that is a password manager is secure enough since that key is encrypted. Can you get a discount if you upgrade to Diamond? Absolutely. I'm going to send an email to everyone here with a link to schedule. If you guys are interested in talking more about inheritance, understanding this stuff, I can get you guys a link to talk to myself, or more likely one one of the members of the sales team. They can answer all your questions about all this. I definitely want to make sure that we're giving our long-term clients who have trusted us for a considerable amount of time and some discounts and incentives here. But yeah, that's we'll definitely make that happen for you. Any other last minute questions before we wrap up here? All right. Thank you so much for joining us. I will send out that email with a link to book some time. And yeah, talk to you guys soon. Bye.